Everybody. I hope our devs are really excited to dive into Adapter. And now I am bringing to the stage another one of our great sponsors, the Chartmetric team. You're going to be hearing from Jay Hung and Peter Gomez, and they're going to walk you guys through the API as well as the user interface for Chartmetric. And then right after, actually right at the end of the night, you're going to actually hear from Michelle from Chartmetric as well. So a busy day for that team. And without further ado, I want to bring Jay and Peter up to the stage.
Hello, can you hear me?
Sound great, Jay.
Great. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, you guys are able to see this?
Yep, can see it.
Awesome.
That's good.
Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Jay Hung. I'm the VP of Engineering here at Chartmetric. Really happy to be here to just tell you a little bit more about, kind of what we do here, share with you a little bit about our data, and also take you through a little bit of our dashboards. My portion is going to be fairly brief so that we can quickly get you over to the API portion of the talk. So why don't we just dive in? So what do we do here at Chartmetric? We gather data. We gather lots and lots of data surrounding artists and their music. Just move the Zoom bar. So we track over 6 million artists. We track over 18 million albums, 50 million tracks, playlists, curators, charts, genres, etc. Lots and lots of data. And where are we getting the data from? These are just some of the sources of data that we get. We have Spotify, Instagram, Pandora, TikTok, lots of different sources. And then once we have that data, what do we do with that data? Let's see, no, it's not going up. I think there's a lag. You guys see this?
We can see compelling visuals and powerful insights.
Great, yeah. So after we get that data, we process that data, we clean it, we link different data sets that are linked together, that are relevant. We sprinkle a little bit of Chartmetric magic on it to bring in some additional insights, and then we deliver all of that back to you, as compelling visuals and insights. And then I have a few screenshots that are here in this talk, but I thought I would just switch over to our live web app and just kind of take you through a quick UI demo. And let me know if you can see this now.
Yep, it looks good.
Great. So if you have an account on Chartmetric, you can basically go to app.chartmetric.com. You can sign up for a free account and you'll have a trial. You should be able to use our entire platform. And once you log in, you usually drop into this dashboard right here. Just click on that refresh. And basically here's where it tracks the artists and the content that I'm interested in, that I followed. So we can see here, there's a number of artists that I've already followed. There's also tracks that you can follow. For instance, if I have an artist and I want to kind of monitor some of the songs and how they're performing, I can do that here. Also, playlists to see, what are some of the hot playlists that I want to keep track of, and albums and curators as well. Okay. Zoom bar. And then, most of our traffic are around artists, as you may imagine. So if we click here in our artist section, you can see that, we have lots of the artists that are presented on our site. These are all sorted by Chartmetric Rank, which is our own internal ranking algorithm in terms of, how big an artist might be. The interesting thing here is to click an artist filter, and it allows you to basically slice and dice this type of content in different ways. For instance, if I only wanted to see, TikTok artists with, over 1 million TikTok followers or 2 million TikTok followers, I can go ahead and do that. Give it a second and it'll refresh. If I want to do the same for Pandora or Spotify, I can do the same. We also have some filters here on the audience. If I wanted to find artists that resonated much more with women, I can make the adjustment here. Give that a second and it'll basically return the results. And then let's see, let's say we want to dig in a little bit more to a particular artist. We can go ahead and click and view that artist page. And here you can see, lots of the different data that we may aggregate for this particular artist. We have some summaries and some stats here. A lot of folks like to look at our streaming data. And we track things over time. So you can see the charts of how they perform among these metrics, throughout their history. TikTok is a very popular section for us these days. We track the folks who are finding success on TikTok, as well as the songs that that are popular on TikTok. We have audience analytics, lots of information in terms of where your top listeners might be coming from, your breakdown of your Instagram followers, playlists that the music might be on, how they're performing over time, what are some of my tracks and how they're performing. Let's see. Sorry, I have lots of overlaid windows here. Okay. If we click over, we can look at, playlists. Let's say you have an artist that, you want to try to get their music on different playlists. What are some of the options that you have? You can click over and you can look at that. You can find different playlists by different genres and subgenres. If we click over to rock classics, we can take a look at this particular playlist. We can see how this playlist has trended over time, the kind of followers that they have, what type of tracks that they may have added to it over time. Let's see. We also have a section for charts. This is where you might be able to find, who are the top ranking artists on different charts for this week versus last week, or even on a daily basis. What are some of the tracks that, might be popular on various charts? We have lots of different services that we cover down here as well. And then, we also have geographical information. For instance, if you click on cities, we can show you who are some of the top artists in those particular cities. Here we have this at a global level. Let's say we wanted to go in there and look up who are the top folks in Brazil. We can go ahead and do that. And I'll basically show that, and you can drill down into that and see more data for that. So now I'm going to switch back to my slides. So why do we do all of this? Why do we present all of the, why do we gather all this data? Why do we present all these visuals and insights back to you? It's really just, we want to help the music industry. We want to help people make better and more impactful decisions, backed by data. And what are some of those decisions? We want to help you answer questions like, does my artist appeal to certain markets? Does it appeal more to females versus males? What are some cities that I might be able to look at? If you're a new artist, you're looking to release, a song or an album, how do you think you're going to perform? When you can use Chartmetric to look up other artists that are similar to yourself, maybe in a particular genre, maybe you got to start right about the same time, have the same type of follower profile and demographics, and then you can see how they may have done and have some expectations for how you might do in certain markets and so forth. I think I have a duplicate slide, but here's a number of different ideas and use cases where our data might be useful. We might help certain folks discover new artists to sign, evaluate the performance of a particular artist or a particular song. We might provide you some data before, during, and after maybe some major events. For instance, recently we had a Super Bowl here in the United States, and we were able to tell, how those artists performed, what kind of plays that they were receiving right before the event, what type of followers growth they may have experienced before the event, as well as what happened afterwards. So you can start to gauge the results of different campaigns that you might be doing. And at the end of the day, we really just want to help, the music industry, and music professionals just create more successful careers. Utilizing our data, insights that we can provide, we want to help people make better decisions so that you can grow your careers. And with that being said, I know a lot of you folks are here to learn about the API. I showed a little bit about the UI, but if you want to access the data right away, Peter will continue now and tell you more about our API.
That's right. So I have a lot to cover today, and thank you for that amazing introduction, Jay. I think it's really useful, even if you're just a hackathon participant, to see what this data looks like. And if you want to see and explore a little bit more about the dashboards that Jay was just walking through, you can actually go over to app.chartmetric.com or even just chartmetric.com. And you can sign up for a free 7-day trial. So you'll be able to see all the charts, all the data that we have as a sort of preview. And then we offer several tiers depending on how much data you need and how you want to access it. But like Jay mentioned, I know a lot of you are more interested in the API, and accessing this data programmatically. So that is what I'm going to talk about over the next about 20-25 minutes. So you should be able to see this presentation. And does that look good for everyone? You see it? Okay. So, right. So I like to think about the API, and also I guess I forgot to introduce myself, but I'm Peter Gomez. As Jay mentioned, I'm a full stack engineer here with Chartmetric. So, I help out everywhere from the database all the way through the front end, but I spend most of my time with the API managing that. So this is your backstage pass to Chartmetric. You can imagine there are a few opinions that are baked into our user interface. We have terabytes and terabytes of data, and it doesn't make sense to show you guys all of that first time you open the web page, but especially for some of these more intricate business decisions you're trying to make, if you're looking at just a specific city, if you want to drill deeper, further, automate reports, have internal dashboards, anything like that, it's very useful to have direct access to the API. So why would you? Like I mentioned, you have raw, unfiltered data you're able to access through the API. It's a bit more direct than something like the user interface, which does let you export CSVs. So most of our charts, you're able to click a button and export it right into a downloadable CSV that you can attach to emails or include in reports. But this API sends you everything in JSON format. So anybody who's worked with web development will know that is your ideal mode of transport for data. You're able to spin up applications, integrate it with your own data, schedule reports. You have the Chartmetric team to email, so we'll help you debug access if you're unable to authenticate, if you're getting wrong results, if you're getting an error, we can help you explain it. And what I think is most powerful, you can enrich your own data with our API. So if you have maybe limited data, or if you just have a list of names or a list of Spotify links, if you're starting from an Instagram URL, there are a million different ways to integrate your own data with ours and help Chartmetric help you. So to get started, you can email hi@chartmetric.com and you can request access to the API. And if you're a hackathon participant with Measure of Music this weekend, you can include your team number and we'll send you back a refresh token, no questions asked. You'll be able to make 200 requests per minute as a hackathon participant. So that should be more than enough to play around and build a really cool application. But if you're not a hackathon participant, you can discuss the rate limit you want, maybe 50 requests per minute is all you need. And we have some customers that go up to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 requests per minute. So, we won't limit you. And once you have a refresh token, you can provide an access token that will expire after an hour. And with that access token, you can authenticate through the rest of the API. And of course, when that access token expires, you return to step 3, get a new access token, rinse, repeat for as long as you want to be using the API. And for everything I'm mentioning in this talk, every API that I'm going over, every process, you can go to api.chartmetric.com/API-doc, as you see down at the bottom of the screen, and you can follow along. And you can explore some of the other APIs. We have some of the other data because there is much more than I can cover today. But let's start jumping into an example. So this is how authentication would look like. You would make a post request to the URL that you see there. And this is all covered in the documentation, but you'd attach your refresh token. And in a response, you'd get an access token. And you can use that access token with the bearer auth pattern to get any other data that you might be looking for. So you might be thinking, wow, that's really awesome. You know, you've been hearing about this for about 15 minutes now, but what can you really do with the API specifically? Well, let's jump into it. Let's say you want to identify an artist. So this is the artist identification problem. All you might have is a name, but you want to get access to their social media, streaming services. You want to have their Instagram links, their Twitter links. And what you can use for this is the API search engine plus the social and streaming service URLs, APIs. And you see those endpoints at the bottom of the screen. And now this might look like this. So you could say, get with a query of Justin Bieber and a type of artists. This would return a list of matches, but usually the top will be your best bet since we since we sort it by score. And with this ID, this 3479, you could make an artist URLs request with this ID fitted into the path. And this is some of the data you get back. So you might get their Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, iTunes, Facebook, Spotify, and I haven't shown it here, but you get Deezer, you'll get Beatport, anything that has been linked on the Chartmetric platform, you have access to here through the API. So if there was ever something that we didn't give you somehow, and we don't have plans for it, you can follow these URLs and get it yourself. You know, we really want to empower the user here. So now, data enrichment. Let's say you've gotten a little further than their name. Let's say you have their Spotify profile and a few basic metrics, but you want metadata, you want statistics, you want historical information. Especially that last point, historical information, there are a handful, I mean, many more than a handful of APIs that'll help you with that. But I want to highlight the metadata API because this is your one-stop shop for everything you'd see on an artist's page. So let's say here, this is the example we used last time, and we're going to stick with Justin Bieber. But let's say we have his Spotify ID, which you'd get from his link. And you can plug this into the Get IDs API. This will give you that same Chartmetric ID, which is your key to the rest of our data. And you can plug this into the artist metadata endpoint, which would give you, and get ready, it's a lot, all sorts of things: their name, gender, their artist rank and score, like you would see on the artist list that Jay highlighted. But you'll see a few things that are behind the scenes too. So you'll see their engagement rank, fan base rank, ISNI, pronouns, their songwriters that they've collaborated with, the full markdown description that you'd see on the artist page, along with, and this is, I think, what's going to excite a lot of you, is the CM statistics object. And I've bolded a few of the fields that I think are most interesting, but depending on the question you're asked, you know, you'll be finding different of these fields interesting. But you'll see Spotify monthly listeners, current Instagram followers, YouTube channel views, TikTok followers and likes, YouTube daily video views, Spotify editorial playlists and total playlists, where editorial is all of the official Spotify playlists, so top hits, anything curated by Spotify themselves. You can keep going. You'll see the same sort of data for Amazon, YouTube, Shazam, TikTok follower rankings now. So this section of the object is all about, if you took all 6.5 million artists that we tracked and you put them in a big row, in a big list, this is their position on that list. So you can see if you sort all of our artists by TikTok followers, Justin Bieber is rank 46. But interestingly, if you sort that same list by TikTok likes, he's 370th. So this gives you all sorts of insightful information that you can use to base your decisions around. You keep going and you'll see our patented CM artist rank and score. And you'll notice this is a value from 0 to 1. And to get to the same score that we show on our dashboards, you'd simply multiply by 1,000,000. And we have this in our documentation as well. And I'll also like to highlight that we have weekly, monthly, and bi-monthly diff data, which will have all the same fields that you've seen before, but in a difference context. So you'll be able to see, let's say, his followers went up by 20% from last week, but they're down 10% from last month. And you can infer lots of interesting information from that. And now the last example I'll go through is geographical insights. So tying back to what Jay mentioned in his section, we have a lot of geographical information at the city and country level. But let's say you have this question. You want the current top 100 tracks played on the radio in my city. You can accomplish this using two APIs. You can use the search engine again, which is one of our most powerful endpoints, and the city top tracks API, which again, you see down at the bottom of the screen. So you'd start, let's say, with Chicago, and you could say Q equals Chicago and type equals cities. This will give you a response, a list of matches, but the top, once again, will be your most likely. We sort by population for cities and countries. So if there's a Chicago somewhere in, I don't know, Texas, right, that will be much lower in the results than the Chicago in Illinois, which you can also disambiguate using the province. But with this ID, the 7057, that's our internal ID for Chicago, you can plug that into the top tracks endpoint along with radio as your type. Other types are like YouTube, as Jay mentioned. And this will give you a very rich response with each track and a load of information about it. So you'll get an image URL, name, genres, which we refer to as tags here. The CM track ID, which you can then plug into any other endpoint having to do with tracks. The country they're associated with, other platform IDs, so any Spotify tracks and albums that are associated with this track, you'll be able to look up. And it goes on and on and on, and this barely scratches the surface. Now, in the interest of time, this is where I'm going to end the examples, because depending on the type of information you're interested in, say it's about albums or playlists, curators, you will have a totally different set of APIs that you'll be using, but this is the general format where you can look through the API documentation that I mentioned at the beginning, find the either data point, column, or information that you're looking for, and step through the docs. If you have any issues, you can always email us at hi@chartmetric.com or support@chartmetric.com. And there's a good chance I will respond to that email directly and help you out. So if you're getting an error, I can help you. If you're seeing an inconsistency with data, we can get that resolved. And I think you guys will really enjoy using this API. You know, as its primary maintainer, I think it's a great piece of software, and I think it'll help you over the weekend with your project. I think it'll help your business if you're trying to enrich your insights. And like Jay said, really, we're just trying to help the music industry here. And this is a programmatic way to do that versus a more intuitive explorative approach that the dashboard takes. So with that, I think we're just about at time, and we've blocked out about 10 minutes here at the end for any questions you guys might have. And I'm going to start looking through the chat here and see if there's anything I can address.
I can help you out, Peter. So looking at one right now, first of all, thank you very much, guys, both of you guys, for the talk. Really appreciate it. I know a lot of people here really love Chartmetric. One that's a really interesting question from Carmel. When do you start tracking an artist? So what if they are small artists or band, they're not yet like verified on social media? How do you determine when they end up in the Chartmetric platform?
So that's a great question. And it depends on the linking that we have for that artist. So the Chartmetric rank and score metrics that we maintain and that you'll see front and center on the artist list are an aggregate, really more complicated than an aggregate, but it is the summation of a lot of different data points. So this is things like their Wikipedia views, their YouTube channel subscribers, their Spotify daily, monthly, yearly listeners and followers, their playlists. And depending on all of those pieces of information, we will rank the new artist in comparison to the rest of the artists we have, which will also lead to certain jumps. Let's say you just attached a Spotify link to yourself on Chartmetric. You might see a bump of a few thousand or a few 100,000 places if you have good numbers there. But it is dependent on what data we have access to and what data you guys link, which you can do yourselves through the dashboard. So hopefully that helps answer that question.
I think it's clear, definitely. Another question. Someone's asking, what's your favorite feature or product, Peter? Seems like there's a huge number of use cases, Chen says.
That's a tough one. So I think one of our coolest features is the top Spotify monthly listeners charts. And you might have seen Jay highlight that on the dashboard. But you get to see some really rich, detailed information about demographics down to the city level. And we use Instagram followers and audience data to enrich some of this. But I think that's one of my favorite features, especially on the dashboard, just how visual and how good it feels to zoom in and see, that list below the map. And see, just in what I see in this little rectangle here, what are the top artists? And I think that's one of the most unique features. I haven't seen that pretty much anywhere else, and I love playing with it.
That's great. One of my favorite features on the UI and the API as well is around the city data. I just think it's really cool to see how the cities change and move, like helping to so different in various cities. So that's great. Someone else is just shouting out they love the podcast as well. If you guys don't know, Chartmetric also has a great podcast, so make sure you check it out. I am biased as I've been on it twice now, but it's a great podcast. Someone else, Adrian, is asking just how far back does the data go? How far back in time?
Once again, it depends. A lot of our biggest Spotify artists, we go all the way back to 2015 and even before then. And some of our bigger YouTube artists, go back to 2017, 2018. So we have years and years of data. And especially interesting is when you connect one of these new artists, you'll be able to see history immediately. So we contact a lot of these DSPs and social media platforms directly and have access to years of information off the bat. So right when you connect, you'll be able to see some of your historical information.
Great, that's really cool. Let's see, someone else is shouting out the 6-month reports that come out as well, that they really love. Michelle is going to talk a bit about that on her panel, I'm sure, in a few minutes. What else do we have here? Let's see. Sorry, there's so many questions.
And I'll also just I'll just shout out also our blog. So blog.chartmetric.com is a great way if you're just getting into this space, or if you're just getting to Chartmetric, to peek behind how we collect data, what some of our numbers mean. For example, a trigger city on Spotify, I think, is an absolutely fascinating article to go read about. There's a series written by some of our data experts, some of our analytics teams, and it is a great way to develop an intuition and know where to look, because I know, especially once you start your free trial, there is just, it's overwhelming. And that's sometimes a problem we run into, is we have so much data, it's hard to know what you're looking at. And the blog and the podcast, like you mentioned, is a great way to develop that and learn more.
Yes, definitely. Someone else is asking here, does Chartmetric provide any recommendations? Say, for example, playlists you should submit per platform.
Playlists you should submit. I think
what they're I think is what.
Like what playlists do you have a best shot on each platform? Yes, we do. We allow filtering, so sort of like you saw on the artist list, you can filter playlists by genres, by followers, by all sorts of metrics, and you can look at slices relevant to your artists. So if you're interested in Spotify playlists, that is going to look different than, say, YouTube playlists, and we give you those options. And of course, if you're interested in more, you can always look through the API as well, and you'll be able to pull out programmatically some deep insights there.
All right, let's see. So another question has come in. Are you going to focus on the development of ready-to-share social media assets based on new platforms directly from the platform? I don't know if I understand what that question is asking, to be completely honest.
I think I do, actually.
Okay,
so this is an idea that we've played around with before, and we are definitely still pursuing development of a feature like this. But to sort of clarify that question, what they mean is, let's say, a share to Facebook button with an artist's page. So you might be able to see a rundown without being a Chartmetric user of that artist's information. So you might see a jump last week of your Spotify followers, and you want to make a marketing push out of that. Or you might want to, just brag to your friends and say, hey, look, I just got 20,000 new followers from my new album. Check it out on Chartmetric. We are interested in that direction. We really want to make some of this more visible to non-Chartmetric users. And that's something we're going to focus on in the future. So
yes, I understand. That makes total sense. That's an excellent idea for self-promotion. Love that. That's great. We have two questions around TikTok. So one is asking, basically, how do you get the TikTok data? And then secondly, they're asking, is it only official audio uploads, or is it aggregated like different versions, so people have different snippets of the tracks and things like that?
Good questions. So for the answer to your first question is, we get it directly from TikTok. So we have deals with a lot of these social media companies that allows us direct access to their data. And of course, some of the specifics are a little closer kept, but to answer your question, we get it directly from the source. So we have lots of confidence in our data. But to answer your second question, is it just official sounds? No, actually. So this is one of the most interesting things. And if you go through and play through the dashboard, you'll see, if you select a track, you'll be able to see all the sounds associated, if it's any chunk that is selected from that sound. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of pop-ups here. Any sound that contains the track will appear in our data. So it's not specific to a portion. If your song is anywhere in a TikTok sound, and it doesn't matter how big that TikTok user is, it'll show up and it'll contribute to our metrics.
That's very cool. So all of those different versions of the tracks people are seeing, they'll all be aggregated together in TikTok. Very cool. Let's see. I think maybe have time for just one more question. Let's see here. We have can you track the UGC trends of audio? So for those that don't know what UGC stands for, it stands for user generated content. And so the question is the user generated content as well as like the official, music videos, things like that tracked and counted?
Absolutely. So you'll be able to track actually down to the day, how many users are creating sounds, how many sounds there are, how many listens or views those sounds are generating, and the trends of those. So you'll be able to look back week by week, month by month, how much attention your artist is getting on TikTok, along with other platforms like YouTube or even Genius, which I think is a really interesting one.
I agree. Great. So I think that's probably all the time we have for questions this time around. But I want to say thank you to Peter and Jay for coming and chatting with everybody today. Participants, you're going to get premium access to the platform for the weekend for you guys to work on your projects. You'll also get access to the API like Peter mentioned. And you're going to hear from Chartmetric again with Michelle very shortly, actually. And so with that, just going to say a huge thank you to the Chartmetric team. And if you guys give us 1 minute, we're going to transition to the next chat. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.